Snow drifted down like slow-falling ash, softening the edges of the crooked wooden stalls that lined the Christmas market. Lanterns swayed on ropes tied to posts, their trembling light casting bright halos on the faces of men who had lost their humanity long before the first snowfall. Voices rose and fell in sharp jabs, laughter sharpened by greed, boots scraping against frozen boards, coins clinking like cruel bells. Asterisk, but the stage at the center was where the cold truly lived. Asterisk, 3 women were chained to wooden stakes, wrists bound behind them with frayed rope, snow gathering like pale frost across their hair and shoulders. Behind them, shoved under a canvas tarp, were a row of crude cages, each one stuffed with children whose small hands gripped the bars. Their silent tears caught the lantern's glow like shattered glass. Asterisk. Then the butcher stepped forward. Asterisk, not a real butcher, but he wore the apron, stiff with dried stains, and held a cleaver as if he enjoyed the weight of it. His voice cut through the air like an axe-splitting bone. Asterisk lot 7. He bellowed, gesturing at the woman in the middle, tall, fierce-eyed, even in captivity. Strong, quiet, knows her work. Who'll give me a start and bid? Asterisk, snow thickened. Men murmured. Someone laughed. Callahan Reed moved through the crowd like a winter storm given human shape. He was 34, rugged with a coat that hung heavy from too many cold nights and too many wrong roads. His jaw carried a scar from a buffalo stampede years ago. His eyes held the exhausted fire of someone who'd lived more lives than a man should in such little time. His voice, when he spoke, always sounded like he'd swallowed dust and regret. Asterisk, he didn't come to buy. He hadn't come to save. He'd been tracking the cold wind and a rumor, nothing more. Asterisk, but destiny has a sound. And sometimes it's the sound of a woman lifting her chin. Asterisk. Callahan's step slowed as the lantern light glinted across her throat. A leather token, braided hide tied with a distinct knot, hung there. A token he knew as well as the lines on his own palm. His sister had worn the same one the night she vanished. Taken by raiders when Callahan was too young and too scared to stop them, his heartbeat stumbled. The mark on the token, 3 small scratches crossed by an arc, was the sign of the Red River Girls. Asterisk, his sisters. People, his people. Mara, Kestrel. Asterisk, he hadn't seen her since they were children playing by the river bank, sharing stolen apples and whispered plans of freedom. Asterisk, now she stood on a stage, snow gathering on her lashes, chained like an animal. Callahan's jaw locked. The butcher raised his cleaver. 1 silver for the woman. 2 for the set. A man shouted a number. Another man spat a counteroffer. Asterisk, Callahan stepped forward, his boots crunching against frozen plank. Take her off the block, he said. The butcher blinked. The crowd stilled. Asterisk, what was that? Asterisk, I said. Callahan's coat fell open just enough for the men nearest him to see the handle of the Colt at his hip. She's not for sale. Asterisk, a man laughed nervously. Another cursed. The butcher leaned forward. Asterisk, double quotes, son, you got the wrong night. These here are goods, asterisk. Callahan cut him off. You're selling people. That's not a night, that's a sin. Snow fell harder. Wind blew. Asterisk, the butcher lifted the cleaver. I asked for coin. You gave me trouble. Asterisk. Trouble's cheaper, Callahan said. A shot cracked, but not his. Someone in the back fired a warning round to rattle the crowd. Chaos splintered the silence. Men reached for guns. Boots scraped. Children whimpered. Callahan moved. He leaped onto the stage, slammed his shoulder into the butcher, sending the cleaver spinning. Mara lurched as the chains tugged. Callahan's hand flashed and cut her bonds with a knife pulled faster than thought. She staggered but stayed upright. Follow me, he ordered. For the children. She said first. He nodded once. The fight was a blur of fists, splintering wood, shouts swallowed by snow. He ducked a punch, drove his knee into a man's gut, smashed another's nose with the butt of his revolver. A lantern toppled, glass shattering, flame hissing into the snow. Callahan untied the other women. They didn't scream, they'd forgotten how. They grabbed the chains that had held them and used them like weapons, slinging them at the men who'd tried to break them. The stable boy Skinny, trembling but brave, kicked open the cage latches. Children spilled out, shaky and disoriented, their breaths white clouds in the freezing air. Go. Callahan shouted, "Stay low." They ran. He and the women and a dozen small lives fled into the labyrinth of alleys behind the market. Bullets snapped past like angry bees. Snow swallowed footprints as fast as they made them. Someone screamed in the distance. Maybe a guard. Maybe a victim, but Callahan didn't look back. Not looking back was a skill he'd learned young. When they reached the shelter of an old stone wall outside town, breath burning in their throats, Mara finally faced him fully. Her eyes were not the eyes of the girl he remembered. These were warrior's eyes. A mother's eyes. A survivor's eyes. "You're Callahan Reed," she said. "Not a question." He nodded. "You left us." He swallowed. "I was a boy." "You were old enough to stay." Snowflakes clung to her hair like tiny ghosts. Her jaw trembled not from cold, but from the weight of years. Callahan exhaled. "I know, and I'm sorry." She looked away, not forgiving, not condemning, just acknowledging a truth she had carried long enough. One of the younger women tugged Callahan's sleeve. They took our children. Weeks ago. Months for some. Slavers, black hats from the North Road. They raid farms, riverside shacks, tribal camps. They take the young ones for labor. They keep them in the iron mine, Mara said. North of Red Pass. 20 men, maybe more. Rifles. A leader with a scar down his lip. Laughs like he owns the earth. Callahan's mouth hardened. He'd met that kind of man. The kind who counted children like cattle. We're getting them back, he said. Mara studied him. Why now? Why return? Callahan hesitated, then opened the fist he hadn't realized he'd clenched. The braided token lay in his palm. For her, whispered. And for what I failed to be. Mara's eyes softened, only for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Then we ride at dawn, she said. Dawn carved the desert in shades of gold and bone. Callahan led from the front, his eyes hunting the ground for clues. A wagon rut, snapped mesquite twig, a scrap of cloth snagged by thorn. The women rode behind him with children wrapped in blankets. Mara kept watch as if she'd been born with vigilance carved into her. Bones. A mitten bobbed from a bush. A broken toy horse lay in the dirt. Tiny footprints. Trailed into a gully. Callahan crouched beside them. His fingers brushing the small tracks as though he could hear the children's heartbeat echoed in the earth. We're close, he said. A gunshot cracked. The ambush came from a rocky outcrop where 3 slavers lay in wait. Bullets punched dust from the ground. Horses reared. A woman screamed. Callahan dived behind a boulder and fired back. Mara dropped to her stomach and crawled toward a wounded child, dragging him to cover. Leela wiry. Fierce snatched a fallen rifle and returned fire with perfect aim. 3 shots. 3 bodies fell still. Callahan rolled to his knees, breathing hard. The women stared at him not with fear, but with the dawning understanding that he was a weapon they'd been missing. You all right? He asked. Mara brushed dust off the child's cheek. Better than them, they pressed on. By late afternoon, the iron mine rose before them, a jagged maw carved into the canyon wall. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney. Men patrolled the yard with rifles slung lazy across shoulders. Inside the mine, Callahan could hear faint sobs echoing like trapped birds. He counted 12 outside. More inside. We need a plan. We don't need perfect, Mara said. We need courage. Asterisk, he nodded. Fine, listen close. Asterisk, he sketched the plan in dirt. Simple, brutal. Effective. 2 women would set a small fire near the west wagons to draw guards. Mara and Lila would slip into the shaft with Callahan. Asterisk, once the children were freed. They'd escape through the east cleft narrow. Steep, but hidden. Asterisk, no heroics, Callahan said. No splitting up. Asterisk, but Mara shook her head. Children first. Always. He couldn't argue. Night descended like a living shadow. The fire at the wagons flared, smoke billowing into the air. Guards rushed to it, swearing. Callahan, Mara, and Lila slipped through the opposite side. Shadows among shadows. Asterisk, the mine's interior groaned with old wood beams and dripping water. Torchlight flickered along walls, stained with sweat and fear. They found the children huddled behind a barred timber door, tiny figures hugging each other. Some barely old enough to speak. Callahan smashed the lock with the butt of his revolver. The children flinched. Asterisk, it's all right, he said softly. We're here to take you home. Then a sharp whistle pierced the air. The alarm. Asterisk, run. Mara shouted. Asterisk's children poured out. Leela scooped 2 under her arms. Callahan lifted 1, then 2 more, and pushed them toward the cleft. Asterisk, the leader, emerged from the shadows, a hulking man with a scar slicing his lip. Asterisk, well, he drawled. A rescuer. He aimed at a little girl. Callahan moved faster than thought, shoved Mara aside, grabbed the girl, and took the bullet across his ribs. White-hot pain exploded. Staggered. Mara screamed his name. But Callahan didn't fall. Asterisk, he charged the leader, smashing him into the wall. They grappled, fists, knees, rage. The leader slammed Callahan's wounded ribs. Pain blinded him. Darkness teased the edges of his vision. Asterisk, but Callahan saw a flash. The toy horse one child had dropped, and he heard a thin voice whisper, Asterisk, please. Strength returned like fire. Callahan grabbed a fallen chain and whipped it across the leader's jaw, sending him sprawling. Asterisk, Mara, and the mothers arrived then, not as victims, but as warriors unleashed. They tore through the remaining guards with the fury of years stolen. Chains, stones, fists, whatever they had, became weapons forged by grief. Asterisk, moments later. The yard fell silent except for the ragged breathing of the just and the dying. At dawn, with the children safe and bundled in blankets, Callahan lay pale against a rock. Blood soaking his shirt, Asterisk, Mara pressed cloth against his wound. Stay awake, she ordered. Asterisk, he blinked. You're bossy. Asterisk, you're alive, she said. That'll do. Little boy approached, trembling, and placed the toy horse beside Callahan's hand. You saved us, the child whispered. Asterisk, Callahan swallowed. No, you saved me. Asterisk, Mara squeezed his shoulder. You kept your promise, Callahan read. Asterisk, he looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in years, something inside him loosened. Hope. The townsfolk cried when the children returned. Mothers wailed with joy. Fathers broke down in the snow. Siblings wrapped arms around tiny figures that had been ghosts only days before. Asterisk, Callahan watched from a distance, leaning on Mara for balance. The wound hurt like hell, but he'd felt worse pain in his soul long before. Asterisk, the sheriff asked his name. Asterisk, Callahan only tipped his hat. Asterisk, that evening, Mara found him by the riverbank. She handed him the leather token, now cleaned, polished, sacred again. Asterisk, this belonged to your sister, she said. It belongs with you now. For who you've become. He closed his fingers around it. You staying? She asked. He looked at the children playing by the fire, at the women rebuilding what had been broken, at Mara steady as the earth, fierce as the river. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I think I am. Asterisk, snow drifted down, settling on his coat, his hat, the braided token in his hand. Asterisk, Callahan Reed mounted his horse and looked at the horizon, its golden line cutting the morning sky. Asterisk, don't die on the first mile. Mara called out behind him. He smiled a real smile. Not today, he said. Asterisk, and he rode forward, the snow swallowing his tracks. Leaving behind a town that healed because one man decided he wouldn't run from his past. Anymore, asterisk, a cowboy who once walked alone. Finally found where he belonged.